Senator Tim Scott, this is a privilege. I always begin these sessions with an admission. I know there's a preacher on TV who always begins with a joke, and his stuff is pretty funny. I like to begin with an admission. And my admission to you today is that I almost didn't make it. I do not have the ability to move fast anymore. And I did not. I'm in Long Island. I'm in the Hamptons. And I was unable to get the train. So I had to Uber here, which took about 2.5 hours. And I almost called you up to say a prayer for me rather than answer political questions for me. And we're going to get into faith because it's important.
Yes.
But Senator, you're always asked, whenever you're on TV, you're always asked the race question because you're the only African-American senator. Tell me candidly, are you tired of having to defend the GOP? Are you tired of always having to deal with that issue?
Well, Frank, thank you for having me on, number one. It's always cool to spend time with you, and this is a special occasion. The answer to the question is no, I'm not tired of it. I do think that the good Lord made me black on purpose, and perhaps I was able to not deal specifically with the issue of race as an elected official for 20 years. The last 5 years I've had to, mostly because the mood of the country and the issues that have been impacting Americans has required someone to speak out from a different perspective. And as the only Republican African-American in the Senate, it's given me a platform to speak about some of the issues that I think are really important to human flourishing, not just Black human flourishing, but all human flourishing. And so that's been a blessing to do that. Second thing I'd say is I would like to speak about other issues. Unfortunately, I think today we'll speak about other issues, but certainly I'm not tired of the subject, though. I don't want to be relegated to only the senator that speaks about racial issues, because my life story is a story of opportunity. It's a story of living my mother's American dream. It's a story of how good God is in the land of the living and how much America has given me a second chance at redemption. So I don't mind talking about it, but I do like talking about the tax code and economic opportunity and a lot of other topics as well.
And I promise you we will do that. But you mentioned your life story, and it is a challenging life story. What is it? Why did you succeed when so many others failed? And you really are the exception. You're not the rule. And I know you like to promote the idea of opportunity. You even have the opportunity zones.
Yes.
But you were able to create something that nobody else was. What was different about your upbringing that allowed you to escape it?
Yeah, I think first I had a powerful mother who believed in prayer. That really went a long way and still does to this day. I also had the good fortune of being a mentor at the right time in my life. At 15 years old, I failed out of high school as a freshman. My sophomore year, after going to summer school, I catch up with my class. My mentor comes along and he starts telling me something about myself that I needed to know. He saw something in me that I did not see in myself. And I think so often, especially in poor communities, sometimes we don't have the mentor that shows up or the father who's present to help us understand our identity. And without some force, positive force, teaching us or leading us in the right direction, it's easy to give up hope. And I was hopeless from 7 years old to 14. It's really young to be hopeless at 7. And that led me to drifting. And that's always a bad thing. My mother and my mentor, one white and one Black, literally taught me a lot about America. And it's one of the privileges and the blessings of having such a painful story. I can now use it to help other people. And that's the blessing of the good Lord. I always say that my mess has become my message, and that makes me an effective messenger as it relates to hope and opportunity.
So what was it that you learned about America at a young age that really stayed with you and that caused you to take the right path?
I think the most important lesson was that anyone from anywhere at any time can rise beyond their circumstances. Sometimes our view of the outside is so powerful and overwhelming that we miss the golden opportunity to see the world from the inside out as opposed from the outside in. Said differently, your in vision has more to do with where you end up than your natural eyes. And so if we know that, and typically we don't, I certainly did not know that. If we know that, then it's almost like the due north, or the compass, the internal compass. If you can set it, you'll be able to overcome a lot of the challenges in your life, to include for me discrimination and racism, to include for me hopelessness and low self-esteem. I had to reprogram how I saw the world, but I first had to reprogram how I saw myself. And that's what my mentor really spoke to me about, was how to reprogram myself. And not without assistance, but I had to be the person doing it. I had to embrace the concept that I am responsible for my outcome. I don't control my circumstances. I control my outcome based on the hand that I was dealt.
But is it fair? You and I have known each other for 10 years.
Yes.
Or even longer. And part of my awakening or reawakening is learning that you cannot tell someone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps if they don't have boots.
Yep.
If there are no adults in their lives, you had a mom who loved you and you had a mentor who respected you. What about these young African-American boys who don't have any adult in their family? Can you really blame them for choosing a wrong path when they don't even know what the right path is?
Well, I don't think the question really isn't should we blame them. It should we help them find that right path. One of the reasons why every single month I try to speak at a different school in South Carolina, typically impoverished areas of the state, typically Title I or poor schools, because I want to be the voice that comes into that room and talks to kids about their potential, talks to kids about the beauty and the majesty of America, and why, if we bring those two together, your vision and America's opportunity, you start seeing things differently. Here, Frank, I'm not going to give you a speech because you and I are just having a conversation. Our perception of reality might be more important than the reality itself. And so as a young kid mired in poverty without hope, my perception of reality was far more damning than the reality itself. When I was failing out of school, I thought America and this community that I was growing up in had no good options for me. Once I learned that I am the captain of my ship, I'm frankly the rudder as well. That means I get to determine my outcome. It may be harder, I may go slower, I may not go as far. But if I'm the guy in charge of my outcome, that's good news, because if you think it's the white guy that's in charge of your outcome, or the racist system that's in charge of your outcome, or the lack of resources that's in charge of your outcome, it's hard to apply your whole self to create a better future. And that's one of the messages I try to help these young folks accept and embrace, because someone had to teach me that. And I'm willing to go out there and do the same thing. I'll say this, though. There's a lot of pain and misery that is covering high potential in so many kids throughout this country. And one of the things that draws me to who you are is because you are a mentor. You have mentored, kids that have, my story is bad, their story is a lot worse. You have mentored kids who are now in Ivy League schools who are living in their cars. You have taught self-esteem, not by saying, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You've taught people that there is this intrinsic value that you have, that you possess, that's yours. It's only yours. It's all yours. And you help to nurture that value. And when someone becomes aware that they are infinite in their power, comparatively speaking, to what they've been sold, and an infinite power source, comparatively speaking, to a finite power source, it changes the way you see the world. And if you change the way you see the world sees you differently too.
No, I love this. I love this. And I'm not supposed to get it. I'm supposed to just go question by question. I can't help it. I believe in this. So you see this shirt that I'm wearing?
I do.
There's an organization, and the gentlemen are actually on this. I can tell because they're making comments. these three young men are incredible, and there's good projects and good partners. They have done so much good for so many people. They did a tour of the country to visit those cities where African-American men were gunned down by cops. I don't want to ask, is there a problem? Because I would get trashed by doing it by the African-American community. Why are so many young black men getting killed by police in this country? And you tried to address that with policies in the Senate, and you got shot down. Can you address both those for me?
Yeah. So why did the policy fail? It failed because some people allowed the pursuit of perfection to get in the way of the good from their perspective. So the bottom line is politics got in the way of the police reform package going across the finish line, going into conference and being negotiated to be a better package, healthier package, stronger package, and sending a signal to the minority communities today that we see you, we hear you, and we care. Politics got in the way of that because, frankly, in the Senate, there are too many folks under consideration to be vice president. In the House, there are people under consideration to be vice president too. However, one of those individuals, Karen Bass, and I've had 7 conversations in the last 2.5 or 3 weeks, and she has sincerely and thoroughly investigated the legislation I have proposed, and she's making constructive critiques to make it better from her perspective. I can work with that every single day of every week. That's what leads to progress. So I'm still optimistic that we can get somewhere on this legislation if I can get my Senate Democrats to embrace the Congressional Black Caucus leaders' approach to police reform. And we are still apart. We don't see the world the same, but we both want a solution, not after the election, but now. So the question as it relates to why are so many folks like me, who look like me, still being harassed by law enforcement? There are bad apples in every bunch. Law enforcement, by and large, is a community of servant-minded people trying to do the right thing. I believe that with all my heart. I've been the beneficiary of good people, good officers who stopped after a major car accident that ended my football dreams as I went through the windshield, fell asleep driving at 16 years old down an interstate at 70 miles an hour, tumbled through traffic, and an officer, highway patrolman, came up to me and said, "Son, I was laying on the side of the road, glass in my back and my backside. My life seemed to have been ruined. My ankle was broken. I saw my football dreams go out the window." And he was there and he encouraged me. He said, "Your life is far more valuable than the car that was destroyed in this accident." And I didn't believe him, but I've had that experience with cops. I've had experience so many times in different venues. I've also been, unfortunately, stopped 18 times in the last 2 decades for nothing other than driving while black. And there seems to be a persistent legacy issue from the original sin of this country that still haunts us in the justice system today. And that is something that is rooted in the heart of people, not officers, but people. People bring who they are into the jobs that they choose. And unfortunately, some of the bad apples continue to provide reasons for people who look like me to be afraid when they're stopped by law enforcement officers. I instantly put my windows down, put my hands out, because I don't want any mistakes at all. I pull my driver's license and my registration out before. I'm not going in my pockets for anything, because I don't think I get the second chance to prove that I'm a good guy. And that's something I shouldn't have to worry about. I should be treated exactly the same. And that has not been the experience every time.
By the way, I'm trying to bring Benjamin Watson, onto this call. Such a great football player.
You spoke with me a couple hours ago.
Oh, I did not know. Truly, I did not know this.
Wow.
So yeah. I invited him on. I'm hoping he's going to join you, because you do have one thing really deeply in common, which is that commitment to faith and how that has changed your life. But what do you say to these kids? I teach at Verbum Day. It's one of the best Jesuit schools, the best school for young men that I've ever seen. It is in Compton, and a lot of the kids have come from challenging backgrounds, and they look at what's happening now and they say that America is a racist society. They truly believe it, not out of anger, but out of disappointment. I know you well enough that I can ask you, sometimes it does seem, doesn't it, to you that we're a racist society?
My answer is no. You remember who I am too, Frank. I am not from California. I am from the deep South, the place where the Civil War started, Charleston. I ran against Strom Thurmond's son and the namesake of the most popular governor in my lifetime, Carroll Campbell's son, for a congressional seat in that place where the Civil War started. And I was fortunate enough to receive 68% of the vote in a runoff versus Strom Thurmond's son in this place. So that alone tells me that the human heart continues to evolve, and it continues to evolve in the right direction. Opportunity also is evolving in the right direction. Think about this, and this is so important. John Lewis just passed, and I think of him as a real American hero. We may not have agreed on all the philosophical or political issues, but I love that man. He was a good soul. He sat down with me and said, Tim, don't let life ever make you bitter. First piece of advice he gave me in his office, 2011. I have pictures on my phone of that visit. Don't let life make you bitter. And one of the things that I thought about was in 1965, when he was crossing the Pettus Bridge, it was the law enforcement establishment themselves that were attacking the peaceful protesters because they could. German shepherds, guns, water hose, the back of weapons on their heads, beaten within an inch of his life. And he's telling me not to be bitter, number one. Number two, fast forward 50 years, 2015, he asked me to co-chair the trip for the 50th anniversary back to Selma, Alabama, to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And the law enforcement that is there for one purpose: to protect the marchers across the bridge. If that is not the picture of a transformation in our nation, there isn't one, number one. Number two, I would tell you that without any question, there are still pockets of discrimination. And frankly, there are more pockets of racial outcomes based on an old legacy system that is now obsolete. But the pain and the residue continues to bleed in to the modern day, not because our systems are racist, but in many ways, many African Americans were locked out of the system for the first 200 of the 244 years we've been around.
Okay. And I did not know that you and the senator had been speaking before this conversation. And you and I have not actually spoken in 6 months. I want to make the point. I am 62 pounds lighter than the last time you saw me. So
I see.
I lost half of me, and you look just as tough now as you did when you were playing. Please, I've watched your comments on TV, and I know how you feel about what happened to George Floyd. How, from a sports perspective, I was asking the senator a little bit about politics. We're going to go into that, and I promise I will not bring you into that political discussion, just as I will not bring the senator into the football conversation. Football is all-American, and it was very divisive when Colin Kaepernick originally took a knee. Now he's being celebrated for that. What should sports be looked at in terms of solving the divide that we have in this country?
Well, you inspire me. I was actually working out when I got the message from you both, and I jumped off my stationary bike because you were two of the most respected people in my life. And I'm like, I got to run upstairs and get to a better internet connection and get on with these guys. So forgive me if I'm wiping my sweat because I literally my heart was just pumping. So thanks for inviting me. I think, sports has a unifying factor to it. And sports is a sense of normalcy for so many people, which is why you see such an outcry when politics, so to speak, is brought into sport. But I think what people have to realize is that as an athlete, I'm a father. I'm a father of 7, been married for 15 years. I've lived in 4 great cities in America. I care about what goes on in those cities. And not only me, but the men that I share a locker room with feel the same way. And so when we see things happen, like what happened with Michael Brown or Eric Garner or George Floyd, or many of the things you've talked about already, the things that aren't highlighted, the systemic issues that happen in education or policing or whatever it may be, men truly care about these things. And so it's difficult and it's offensive sometimes for us when our fan base, the people that we that cheer us on and the people that we care about performing for and producing a good product on the field, when they disregard these things that so heavily affect us, because we want to contribute to the beauty of America as well. We want to be involved. We want to support the communities that we're living in, the communities that we're working in. And so one of the ways I think that athletes are able to bridge the divide is through fostering conversations. We garner a tremendous amount of respect and notoriety simply because we can do something that a lot of people can't do. We're not better than anybody, but people watch. And so we're able to speak truth, and we're able to speak in ways that unite people and challenge people to think in nuance. So much of our country right now is very, very tribal. It's either or. We don't see a lot of both and. We don't have conversations like the one you're having now. We aren't able to see that, police officers are needed, but there needs to be reform of some respect in the police department. It doesn't mean that they're all bad. It means that, like everything else, we should address issues that are happening in our country. And so for athletes specifically, we guys write op-eds, guys educate themselves, guys vote. And I say guys, but I mean men and women. And we can really in that way unite people instead of divide, because I really think that the overarching message or the desire for most players is to unite behind purposes. We're not seeking to offend people. We're simply seeking to do what we believe is best and to understand the best route to getting to where we all want to go.
Tim, if you had been on the field, would you have taken a knee when it happened 4 years ago? And would you do it at the beginning of this season?
I would not. I think that's a decision that each person has to make. And I said this a while ago that, in my opinion, having 2 brothers who served in the military, father who served in the military, uncles and aunts who have served in the military, and appreciation for the flag. I mean, the flag that we are talking about is a flag that actually unified our country and defeated the segregated South. So it is something that I look at with high esteem and value. I always say, though, that we should stop and understand why they kneel. I said this 4 years ago. So for me, it's not controversial to want to stand for the flag. The controversy around wanting to kneel during the anthem is something that we should lean into and understand where they're coming from. And I was saying that 4 years ago, and I say it again today because I think it still is relevant that we should seek first to understand and then to be understood. And that is something that I would like for us to continue to look for ways to do.
Ben, if you retired, I assume you did not unretire since I last heard from you?
Not as of this morning.
But he was running on that treadmill, so he might have an announcement coming sometime.
Yes, with all these players saying they're not going to play, they're going to come back to you again. Ben, if you were on the field, would you take a knee at the first game this year?
I don't think that I would, but I wouldn't totally remove it from the options. When it happened the first time, I actually tore my Achilles, and I was sitting in the hospital bed recovering when Colin first knelt. And what I said was that, the greatness of America is the fact that he has the right to kneel if he wants to. And like the senator said, we collectively should want to know his reason why. Because for the same reason that Colin knelt is the same reason that many of us, including myself, stand. I've had family members that have been in the military. I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, which is Navy Town, USA. Yeah. Have a tremendous respect for the military and for the flag. But when I stand and think about the flag, I think about the fact that so many people like me, like the 54th of Massachusetts, fought and died under that flag. I think about the Jim Crow South. I think about my parents going through segregation and people calling my father names and telling him N-word to go home. All that is what I think about when I see that flag. And so in many respects, when I stand, it's not because I don't remember and understand the inequities and the racism and all those things that have happened and the things that still exist. I'm standing for much of it in their honor because they stood and they died and they suffered under that flag. And so the same reason some players decide to kneel to bring attention, others have decided to do other things to bring attention. They've written books, they've written op-eds, they've held town halls, they've had conversations inside their living rooms and outside of their living rooms. They've done different ways. There's no one way to protest. And that's why I said I reserve the right to kneel, although I probably would not. But the understanding that we have to have is that there is no one way to bring attention to things that we think need attention brought to them. There's no one way to do it. And we can't allow one section of society, either side, to determine what the right way to fight for a better America is. Because the ultimate goal is still the same, whether you're standing or at least the ultimate goal should be the same, whether you're standing or whether you're kneeling.
Well, I've got one more question for both of you, and this is what differentiates you. There are going to be some people who are on this call who don't like the mixing of religion and politics. And I acknowledge I have an issue with it when it is overt. But there's something, I always ask a question of people, how often do you go to church? Because I think that there's a commonality there, that those who have spirituality in their life, have that kind of faith in God, have a more positive outlook and are more likely to give to charity, are more likely to be closer to their families. Ben, I'm going to ask you first, because then I'm going to send you back to your bicycle.
Yeah. I will get out of the professional's way. Thank you for letting me.
But you're not going to go yet. What role has your faith had an impact on your outlook towards the country and your outlook towards life?
My faith determines every part of me. We don't carry our faith on our side like a suitcase. Scripture clearly teaches that your faith is the embodiment of who you are. We are a new creation. And so everything that we do flows from that. My advocacy and my desire for justice when it comes to sex trafficking or racism or sexism or any other ism or any other disparity is because God is a God of justice, of righteousness, and of kindness, it says in the book of Jeremiah. And so as a believer, I want to be involved with those things because I believe I'm the best representation of the love of Christ when I do those things. And so that ultimately informs my actions. I believe it was John Adams that said that when it comes to our country and our form of government, it only works when there is a certain moral, absolute understanding amongst the populace. Not that we're all the same, not that we're all the same religion, but that we all understand that there are certain moral truths that we all must adhere to, because the freedoms that are embedded in our country only work when there are certain absolutes, when there's a certain understanding of right and wrong. And so the further we move away from that, the further variation we have in that, the more problems we're going to have. And that's just the truth. And that's what's evidence. So for me, my faith determines who I am, what I do, how I approach these things, because ultimately scripture also tells us that God made us all from one blood. In the book of Acts, it says from one blood, he made all mankind. And so we truly are one race. The sin in our lives makes us act in racist ways, in greedy ways, in prideful ways. The list goes on and on and on. But when we get back to truth, we really are but one blood. We just have had a difficult time, not just in this country, but since all mankind, of dealing with each other in a respectful and honorable way.
Well, Ben, I want to thank you for doing this. I know you were not prepared. I know I'm going to get a text from you saying, what the hell did you just do? But you actually
I'm going to say
I'm
more than honored. Anytime. Thank you.
It's brilliant. So, Ben, thank you very much. And we'll see you.
Maybe you can kick me out because I don't know how to get out of here.
I'm gonna kick you out of the screen, but you still can watch the show. Tim, I know that religion matters to you. That there is an issue, and it was raised in the questions that are going up on the screen. There's been a lot of accusations of anti-Semitism, as part of the Black Lives Matter. And I do wish to ask tough questions. I don't want to ask unfair questions. Is there a problem with relationships with the Black community and the Jewish community?
I don't think so. I've had the good fortune of having a really healthy relationship with my Jewish brethren, not to include folks I'm talking to right now. I would say that there's probably a mixed answer. So there's no monolithic Black community. So I can't speak for all African Americans, or frankly, Blacks to be beyond African Americans. There are a lot of folks who've immigrated to this country who may be permanent residents who are not African Americans, who come to the country with a different religious background, with tension and animosity with Jews. That there's lots of ways to answer that question, but historically and traditionally, and in my life, my first chief of staff was an observant Jewish guy. My consultant is still an observant Jewish guy, so don't call for help on Friday night. That's what I've learned. The chairwoman of my finance team, my first business mentor when I was in business, Jerry Zucker, a Jewish fellow. So I went to meetings with Blacks and Jews having lunch together for the purpose of understanding and appreciating the shared challenges and misery in our history. Reading the Old Testament, 4 centuries in slavery, not Black folks, but Jews in America, 4 centuries. So there is a lot of commonalities. Numbers 13 is a fantastic chapter to read about how one sees themselves and what that means in the land that they're going into. So there's a lot of similarities. I actually embrace and celebrate my relationship with my Jewish brethren. I think we have a freedom of religion, not a freedom from religion as Americans.
How can you possibly be the most popular politician in South Carolina? You're more popular than the governor. You're more popular than your Senate colleague, although he'd be really mad. But I can tell you he's not on this, so you can say anything you want. The Republican Party has been accused of being racist. The president's been accused of being racist. You've been a Republican representative in Washington, and the Republican Party of South Carolina picks you over every other politician. I don't get it. I mean, I do get it. I just
don't go back now, Frank. The Bible also says the truth will set you free. You just told the truth. This is wonderful. I don't get it either. So we're on the same page. Listen, I come from a great state of elected officials who serve this nation well, and frankly, on the state level, we have a lot of folks from the governor down to the city council members around the state who are doing really good jobs, making serious sacrifices. For me, I love South Carolina, though. I love South Carolina because this is the state that gave me a second chance. I'm the kid that flunked out of high school. I failed civics, and now I'm a United States Senator because the state nurtured the potential they saw. I love South Carolina, and I am willing to spend the rest of my life paying it forward and paying it back. And maybe that can be sensed when I'm in the presence of other South Carolinians, because I literally feel like I have won the lottery with this birthright, and now the incredible privilege of spending a lot of my adult life looking for ways to bring solutions to people who are suffering. And South Carolinians have given me the chance to be their voice. It says more about them than it does me. I love the fact that I represent the New South, the Deep South, and a great place.
Now I'm trying to bring on, although the picture is really awful, I don't know if I'll be able to, but Everett Alvarez, if he can figure out how to do that, because that looks like a golf ball, or looks like a shot of the moon, actually. Doesn't that look like Neil Armstrong's first step on the moon?
That what that was? I was wondering. I thought that I knew it looked familiar. Now I know why.
So while he tries to figure that out, as you look at Washington, the number one question I've had when people found out I was going to talk to you, and those who knew who you were, their question to me was, why is it that we can't seem to talk to each other anymore? We can't seem to have dialogue with each other anymore. Bob Fell said to me, what am I going to tell my kids? Because my kids think Washington's a poison.
Oh, that's
What
we're
do you
looking at
tell
that.
people? And you guys need to be quiet because we can hear you. What do you tell the people on this call about the poisonous environment and how do we address it? And then Everett, I'm going to go to you in 1 second.
Well, the time of the highest toxicity in Washington is when the cameras are on and people are performing for the cameras on either side of the aisle. That is a very toxic time in our nation's history, and the snippet of time that you see on TV are typically folks who are really good at persuasion, not always in a positive way. I will say this as well, though, that if you actually pay close attention to Washington, the one thing you probably will never see on the news is the fact that a lot of folks get along marvelously well when there are no cameras. And frankly, I say that because the cameras are covering the newsmakers from a conflict perspective. Our coverage has figured out that you can actually monetize conflict, and it is very profitable. The rest of the time, when there are folks getting along well, that is not newsworthy, and it doesn't sell as well. And so 85 to 95% of the time, we're getting along pretty well. And every single piece of legislation that passes and becomes law requires a bipartisan coalition in the Senate.
I got to ask a follow-up. Is MSNBC and CNN and Fox, are they toxic?
Well, here's the challenge I give to my friends, and I've taken it myself. For 10 days, watch no cable news network for 10 days and see if your relationships with your family members, your friends, and your coworkers doesn't go up. I can almost guarantee you that it's going to get better.
We have a special guest here, Everett Alvarez, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a POW in Vietnam longer than anybody else. Is that correct?
Yes,
Wow.
Frank, I was in North Vietnam. I was the first one shot down in August 1964.
Wow.
And the reason
released
to
in
bring you,
February of 1973. Actually, if you are familiar with history, the Gulf of Tonkin was the event that started things rolling in our actions against North Vietnam, and that was me. I was shot down in the Gulf of Tonkin. You can say I started the war, but I also want to say that, like Ben just said previously, what did you do to me here? I didn't expect to be on here, but that's okay. It's an honor to join you.
I'm going to do it because you guys are very special people, and the public does not get a chance to hear anything like this. That's why this is remarkable. There were 210 people on here, which makes this the fourth most participatory of all of these. And you've got elected officials, you got business leaders. So Everett, this is your chance to shine. I don't think there's any institution that has done more for interpersonal relationships than the military, because you actually are dependent upon that person next to you. It doesn't matter who they are. It matters that they've got your back and you've got theirs. And I don't think the public understands that. Could you explain to those on here why the military is such a great equalizer and the impact that it's had on society?
Well, I can probably explain that if I refer to our POW experience. Over the 8.5 years of the war that we were involved in, as far as POWs are concerned, there was nothing that designated you to say that you were going to be shot down and become a POW. There was, it was just a risk that we were taking and flying our missions. And Unfortunately, a lot of us got shot down. Fortunately, a lot of us lived. And the captivity experience, I can tell you, is probably the most unifying experience that we had, because everybody's life depended on the other fellow. And what that resulted was a driving need to be uh, a strongly cohesive and united group of individuals who shared the same basic values as Senator Scott is saying. It had the same goals, we had the same objectives, and we had to watch each other's back. So when this discussion of racial divisiveness, uh, nothing like that ever came up in that experience. And I would say, generally speaking, in the military, that is probably one of the most successful, even though they've had racial experiences in history. Overall, you have to look at the military as a model society with opportunity for all. But going back to our group, nothing like race or difference of our philosophy or religion, and was never even thought of. We were all Americans. We were all in there together. There's another individual I noticed that's listening. Tom Hanton was a later shoot down here, and Tom and the others that shared that same experience. Frank, I can just tell you that nothing ever came up that we would allow to divide us as a group. I mean, we did a lot to hang on together. So when you also talk about the kneeling before the flag, I just don't understand it. I think there are other ways to achieve your goal, but it was that vision of the American flag that was very, very key in our day-to-day life. I mean, that's
So I have a question,
what we were there for, our country.
and I have a question for both of you guys, which is Tim. And can I hold on to you for 5 more minutes? I know we've gone over.
Yeah, I was just
Can I
talking to
keep
my guy about the fact I've got the other one coming up in about 7 or 8 more minutes to prepare for it. So, yeah, let's make this my last question.
Okay. How did you survive and keep the faith? I'm going to ask both of you this question. And Tim, I'll ask you first, because then if you got to go, that's cool. You are an inspiration. I don't know if you've been watching the questions and comments, but these people want you to run for president. And you've heard this before, and I'm going to do it to you now. You really should. You see, this is a genuine war hero right here, and he'll vote for you. How did you keep the faith when what you saw, a society that was so tough on you, and you've been racially profiled, even in Washington, even as a member of Congress?
Yep.
How do you keep the faith? And then Ev, I'm going to ask you a similar question in a second. Tim?
Well, listen, I think you can let life make you bitter, or you can allow life to make you better. And I will simply say that if you continue to look around, even though I've been discriminated against dozens of times, even as a United States Senator, I've actually had thousands of positive interactions with people from all backgrounds. The fact is that when you compare the two, overwhelming is the fact that we as a nation, we really do want to embrace the concept of one American family. And I think what Mr. Alvarez just spoke about, when you're stuck in a foreign land and you're depending on your brother or sister next to you, you don't really care whether they're black or white, red or brown. You want them to have your back. In that foxhole, so to speak, your blood brothers, period. And let me just say this as well. I am confident in America's future because I have a great snapshot of America's past right now. The present day, Mr. Alvarez, is a classic living example of why our nation is exceptional. Let me just say to you, sir, God bless you. Thank you for your service to this nation. In 2014, I think it was, I was asking my estate director, we did an anniversary, 50th anniversary of Vietnam conflict and those folks who served. We had 2,500 people show up on a rainy Saturday morning for us to celebrate the willingness to go someplace and sacrifice all that you have for Americans unborn, for people to experience freedom in the way that you were willing to eliminate yours for theirs. 9 years almost in captivity. If there's ever a picture of why we should be optimistic, it's because of people like Mr. Alvarez, who's willing to sacrifice his freedom for mine. God bless you. And thank you so much, Frank, for having me on today.
Thank you very much, Senator Scott, for your kind words. Thank you.
And they're true.
Thank you very much, sir. And you can't go until I say the same thing about you. If there ever was an example of a role model in Washington, if there is an example of someone who can work across the aisle and get things done, if there's someone who sees the bigger picture and sees the future of the country and is devoted to making America a stronger place, that's you. And I need you as an advisor. I need your support. I need your intervention in my life. And America needs your participation. Never get frustrated. Get frustrated, but you can never quit. Yes, we need you.
Yes, thank you very much, Frank. God bless you. Thank you for your friendship, and we'll text soon.
You got it. Okay. And Mr. Alvarez, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to bring one more person on. How did you survive? There were people who did not make it. What was the secret to you that allowed you to make it for 8 years in the most horrific conditions?
Well, Frank, it was, I think Senator Scott basically mentioned it. I'll share it with you again. In our case, we had shared values. We had a strong patriotic sense of what's our duty and a commitment to our country, to our families, and to our God. And I'll tell you, we prayed a lot. We prayed to our God a lot. And he looked over us. We also had, in a way, a very closely knit society. In those, we had a good communication system. It was a covert system that we developed. It kept us together. We shared every experience we had. We were open. We were honest. We were transparent with each other. We were all humans. We made mistakes. Some of us were less resistant, less tough, perhaps, than others. But we're all human, and we all understood that. We just did our best, and we had a motto. We had a theme. We developed while we were there, and that we knew we were going to come home someday. And that motto was, we're going to come home with our honor, return with honor. And that was probably the strongest reminder of how to conduct ourselves, no matter what we had to face.
We will continue to do Fridays with Frank for the next 4 weeks. We've got a top journalist coming on next week. We've got one of America's greatest historians that you will all recognize. We've got a couple more political figures, and I've got some entertainment and sports people as well. As you can see, the goal in this effort is to provide a nonpartisan look and a non-conventional look, and I'm simply unwilling to be mean. I'm unwilling to play gotcha. That the purpose of these conversations is for us to be better angels, for us to be better people, and to hear perspectives that we usually don't hear. So I want to thank you very much for participating. I'm sorry that we could not get David Patterson in this. It would have been cool. Maybe we'll have him at some point before the summer's over. So everybody, thank you very much, and we are done.